Hi everyone, and welcome to our product demonstration today with Thomson Reuters. I am joined by Jessica Brown, who is Customer Education Director at Thomson Reuters, and Andrew Buckley, who's Vice President of Product Management at Thomson Reuters. Hi, both of you.
Hello.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for joining me. So do you want to really quickly, we're here to talk about Westlaw Edge UK and specifically your generative AI offering within the context of Westlaw Edge UK. Just real quick, can you just describe both your roles for me so people have a little bit of context before we start having a conversation, and we're going to do a demo as well. So Jessica, perhaps you could go first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Customer Education Director. So I manage a team of expert educators across the UK, Europe and Canada who train on all of our products and services.
And Andrew?
Hi, I lead the team in the UK responsible for the product management of Westlaw.
Great, thank you so much. Before we dive, so I've got lots of questions, but I think we're going to do it within the context of a demo, which I'm looking forward to. But just to be clear, so this is a branding question. So obviously, the Gen AI capability that we're talking about is CoCounsel, and I know that there are differences between the US and the UK. We're going to be talking about the UK, and so am I correct in saying that it's Westlaw Edge UK? But you have CoCounsel offering. It's not an integrated, it's effectively alongside, and we're going to be looking at what that means for Westlaw Edge UK customers and potential customers in terms of how they might leverage the functionality of CoCounsel.
That's right. It's alongside CoCounsel. CoCounsel is Thomson Reuters' suite of AI skills, and legal research, AI-assisted legal research, is the manifestation of one of those skills in Westlaw Edge UK.
Yeah, okay. So do you want to start the demo, and then otherwise my temptation would be to immediately ask loads of questions, but if you if you start, and then I'll ask my questions as we go.
Yes, of course. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I hope you can see that now.
Yeah.
All right. So without further ado, I'll dive straight in. You can see on our homepage, AI-assisted research is front and center. So that's the name of this CoCounsel skill that we're using, AI-assisted research, and is designed to do exactly that. It's designed to assist you to get straight in to the most relevant content given a research query. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it by asking a query, and then I'm going to talk about exactly what it's doing. And rather than make you watch me type, I'm going to select something recent, like that, and go ahead and hit submit. So this is now running the query behind the scenes, and it does take longer than a standard Westlaw search, where you'd type in your terms and connectors, you get a list of 100 or so results, and you'd have to start working through them. It does take longer because it's going through a few more stages. But as you can see, I can get an email when it's ready. And also, because it's opened up in a new tab, I can go straight back to the home page and carry on doing something else.
Can you ask normal questions? Do you mind me jumping in? Can
No,
you ask?
not at all.
We talk a lot about prompt engineering, right? We talk
Yes.
about the importance of prompt engineering. We talk about templates. We talk about libraries. We talk about if you don't have the right prompt, if you don't have the right question, you're not going to get the right result. To what extent do people need to be trained, or to what extent do they need kind of to use the proper question can't speak a correct prompt?
Minimal effort needed is the answer, because this is only trained on Westlaw content. You don't need all of that. I'm a legal researcher. I work in this area. I'm looking for this. It understands legal research, so you don't really need that depth of prompt engineering that you need with some other AI products. Now, prompting is important though, and we've got a lot of tips on the site about how to do it. Here you can see some recent ones that I've asked, because how you phrase the query might depend on how the response is formatted. So if I ask for a list of exemptions, I'm going to get a bulleted list. If I ask a closed question, as I've just done, can this be done? I'm going to get maybe a yes, no answer with some summary. So in the sense that the prompt can influence the response, yes, a choice of prompt can be useful, but essentially we're telling you to ask the question as you would ask a colleague. 1 or 2 sentences, enough detail that it can respond, but not a massive amount. And in fact, here on the homepage, if I click on the tips, we've got kind of how to create good queries as well. So you definitely don't have to be a prompting engineer in order to use this tool.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of what it's doing, and I'm going to massively simplify here, partly because I don't understand all the detail, but it's going through 3 stages. The first thing it does is run a search in Westlaw content. That's the very first thing it does. It takes elements from your query, it builds those searches, and it runs that search. So the first thing it's got is a whole load of Westlaw content. At that point, it then gets fed into that large language model. So this is the RAG piece, the retrieval augmented generation, where it's been taught what to look for. What jurisdiction is this? What's the most useful part of the document? Is this good law? All of those prompts have then been built in, so those documents get passed through that large language model. And then and only then does it pass into the generative piece. And that's the piece where it generates the response to your query. So because everything it's doing is grounded initially in that search, we can reduce hallucinations because it has to look at that content. The generative piece only comes in when those trusted documents are found. And it's looking at our case law, our in-force legislation, and our specifically authored topic articles as well. So everything it's going to be doing is grounded in that content. So like I say, that is a simplification. Andrew, anything you want to add on my simplified explanation?
No, I think an important word you used there was reducing the risk of hallucinations. Now, we tested this thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and we didn't see any true hallucinations where a large language model left to its own devices will often make stuff up. It will invent a case name, it will invent a citation. And the grounding of the language model in Westlaw UK's authoritative, trusted content reduces the risk of those hallucinations. But as I said, I think the key word there is reduces. I don't think any responsible supplier should or could ever make the claim that it 100% eliminates hallucinations, but it does a very, very good job of making them extremely unlikely.
So one of the things that we talk about a lot is sourcing. So the fact that when you use this kind of tool, it will show you where it's got the information from, and that you shouldn't use a tool where you can't go to the original source and just check it. So is that sufficient, do you think? So I suppose if in the instance of hallucination, you should be able to detect, if you're doing your, because obviously you're not supposed to just hand over to the machine and just go, no, I'm done, I'm going to work much less hours now. You'll be able to check the source and then effectively smell out if it's come back with something that is not correct or is hallucinated.
Absolutely. And in fact, if we take a look at the response that's generated, if I just switch back, so here's the question that I asked, and here is the generated response. So we've got this summary listing out all the information, and it says, it depends on the specific terms of the lease, but it's given me some case law and some materials that I might want to look at when I'm doing my research. And you can see I've got bracketed numbers, which tells me where the generated AI has got that information. And so for every point that it's mentioned here, I've got all of my citations listed. And if I scroll down, I can see that content listed underneath as well.
What would that look like if it had hallucinated? Would it be, do you think it would be obvious to the consumer, to the end user?
I think it should be, because you've got the extracts of the document here, so I can go in and check the context. And of course, due diligence needs to be done. This Gen AI shouldn't be looked at in context and think, all right, I've done my research, I'm all clear. it would be up to the user. And going back to that editorial importance, so listed within each of these documents are things like status icons, which would tell you that you're looking at a case which has had, subsequent consideration which is positive, or whether it's been mixed or mildly negative. So you have these warning indicators built in because of that editorial control as well.
Yeah, I mean, the examples that I've seen have just been people using ChatGPT, which has none of the none of the training, none of the grounding, none of the retrieval augmented generation, and also people didn't check. This was the incredible thing. People didn't go back to check whether these cases even existed. And there is a responsibility. So I think there's a responsibility on vendors, but there's also a responsibility on the users, obviously. And I think most lawyers, given their training, given the responsibility that they have in delivering the legal advice that they do, I think that they take that responsibility quite seriously. They don't just most lawyers are not just frivolous in the way that they deliver this, and they'll be triple checking, I think.
Absolutely, and they should. And again, that's the beauty about being in this research environment, is I can just click on one of these documents to be taken straight into it, so I can then continue my research. I can do that due diligence. Here I am in the case. I've got all of those other fantastic edge features that form part of the package. So from here, I could find other similar cases, or I can check the citations in context on the precedent map as well. So I've got all of those tools at my fingertips to do that due diligence. The AI has just given me a real jump start on getting into that content as well.
And that's a very important message that we're trying to get across, is that this is AI assisted research. It's not AI completed research. It's an incredible kickstart. It will get you a long way, a lot further down the line and into the advanced stages of legal research, and amongst, in the thick of Westlaw's content and powerful functionality. But it's not doing it for you. And traditional research before this came along, you had to check that. You had to check that the list of results contained everything you would expect. You had to check that the status of the case was correctly described. So it's nothing new to lawyers to have to be very careful in reviewing the results of research.
Yeah, 100%.
And again, I've got a pre-run query on here just to save a bit of time. So here I asked, what are the exemptions to disclosures under the Data Protection Act? Again, a very plain English question. And if I open it up, and people familiar with the Data Protection Act know these are spread across several schedules. So here I've got them. And again, each time it's pointing me towards where it's getting that information. And the information provided here might not be enough. So you can see down at the bottom, we've got this blue box, which enables you to ask a follow-up. So if you want to dig into a certain point, or you want more information on something that the AI has uncovered, this follow-up is a great way to get that clarification or expansion on a particular element. So for this one, I asked what the exemptions were, and it mentioned within the text an exemption relating to journalism. And so if I just close this up, I asked a follow-up. Can you expand on this exemption relating to journalism? And again, it's done that. So again, I can dig a little bit further in to get the content. And again, everything is grounded in the content that it's found.
And in terms of, so Westlaw, obviously people have been using it for a really long time. In terms of the generative, you've had Boolean search, you've had natural language search for a long time, right? Like you've been able to, one of the things I think that Westlaw often stress is, you can sort of ask natural language questions. That's been, so the generative element of it, I mean, obviously generative by the nature of the very word, and often because it can generate vast amounts of, it can generate answers in a different way. It can you can almost converse with it to a certain extent. It can answer your questions. And so can you explain what it's doing in terms of that side of things, and how it, within the context of Westlaw, it really differs from the way that we would normally be searching, and the output, and what you can ask it to do in terms of the way that it generates new content, new the way that it responds, perhaps.
Andrew, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
it's a new and a quicker way of querying Westlaw content, and it will give you a very relevant result set that it is then relying on by way of summarization to give you the answer. And so it's very much a kickstart into your legal research. It will get you to places more quickly than you would have done before, but actually you'll probably end up in many of the same places. You will end up in Westlaw UK's EU UK divergence tracker. You will end up in our case analytics functionality. I don't know if that answers does that answer the question, Caroline?
Yeah, I think it does.
Misunderstand it?
Yeah, no, I think so. So obviously it's providing, it's the summarization, isn't it? So I
Yes.
think so previously people would be asking relatively natural language questions, but what it's doing is it's producing, what's different is it's producing, before it would come back with, I mean, it's been a long time since I've been a litigator, so I'm something to scratch the head, but it would produce the source. But now what it's doing is it's really producing the summary to get you to where you can sort of perhaps use this to advise the client, or you could sort of have a more ready, and obviously extracting the key points that you need to see, as you said, Andrew, you get to where you want to go quicker.
And I'm not suggesting that this is a development we're looking at, but I actually think if you just ignored the summary and looked at the underlying sources that the summary was based on and that it references, that's an incredibly valuable and relevant set of results in of itself. And that's saving you an awful lot of time scanning hundreds of cases, potentially, or hundreds of bits of legislation. You're getting something much more quickly than you would have otherwise had to do it by yourself.
And does it return all the case law that Westlaw returns?
It's one of those tools that should be used for specific use cases. I'm not going to over promise and say it can do absolutely every type of research you want it to, and we are quite clear about that it's not the best use case in every situation. If I just click on this one, it's got suggestions that it shouldn't be used for, and one of them is getting a comprehensive list of cases. It gives you that summarization. But if you do want a comprehensive list, then our case search templates would be the ideal place to start. It can't predict outcomes. It can't take action for you by emailing something to you. So we are quite clear on what the AI doesn't do, because it isn't perfect for every use case. But for that jump start on your legal research, particularly if you don't know where to start, it is the perfect tool.
And all of our cases are available to this process. All of our cases are included within the scope of AI assisted research. So we're not limiting it to a narrow subset of our case law.
So I keep interrupting you. Do you think it's for the firm to provide almost like guidance? I mean, you see a lot of, I know you can't speak for firms, but you deal with a lot of firms, and you kind of maybe see, because you get that benefit of a wide view, you may be able to see what works best. Is firms, I mean, I know it's still early days though, having said that, but so do you think the best thing would be for firms to give kind of get best practice guidance in terms of, because I suppose there's that risk that people might try and use it for the wrong use cases. Is there some sort of like best practice, best way of advising people what to use it for?
I think so, and we certainly cover that in our training, and we got guides and tips and how to use it. So I think it's just like any new feature, it's just being aware what the scope and limitations are. But obviously, again, because we're in that research environment, if I click into a case, I can then see every other similar case to it, every citation to it. So it's just getting you into that first document. That's what the AI does, and it does it better than most Boolean searches. But then obviously it'd be up to the researcher to go that extra step and do that due diligence.
I keep interrupting your demo, Jessica.
It's all right. No, this is good. I like this.
The worst demo environment.
I prefer demos when it's not just me talking. This is perfect.
Carry on.
But again, going back to that trusted information. So I'm back in my data protection example, and it's highlighting a provision of law. Now, straight underneath that, it tells me that provision is not yet in force. So immediately I know it exists and it's relevant, but it's not yet in force. So again, because I'm in this research ecosystem, I can click on the link, I can go into that provision, I can see what the text is. If we have a date when it's going to be coming into force, it would be listed here. I can set up an alert to tell me when a date is published. And I can obviously see the text and what the change is going to be. So again, in terms of that trusted content and the editorial expertise underpinning all of this, you can see at a glance it's relevant, but I might not be able to use it. I need to do a little bit more research. But again, this environment helps you do that.
That's interesting. So the editorial, still so much emphasis on. You've always talked a lot about your editorial capacity and the number of actual humans involved. So that remains, very much a factor.
Absolutely. And here I am in our UK analytics, which gives you a graphical visual representation of amendments to content. If I just hide the chart and go down here, I can see all of the amendments to and amendments by. I can generate keying schedules if I want to see updated versions of acts. You have all of those tools at your disposal to take your research, to be thorough and do that due diligence on things. That AI just gets you started, and it's a great way to get into that content.
And our editorial teams were absolutely critical to the development and the testing of this. But not only that, it's the editorial value add that they have been producing for decades that is like rocket fuel for the AI. It's when we talk about grounding it in Westlaw UK content, we don't just mean the flat text of a judgment. We don't just mean the text of a piece of legislation. We're talking about all of the relationship gathering, all of the status information, the citator data that we have. And this is all value that editorial colleagues have been adding, as I say, for decades, and it's really powering the AI and taking it to a very powerful place.
And just one kind of final example on that due diligence, because I know I'm labouring the point. But here the AI is pointing out that one of the cases it's found is entirely on point for my research, but it's had mixed consideration. So again, if I find that case, I can see a big orange icon. I can click to go into it. And again, quickly use those AI tools. So I can just, those edge tools. So if I click on the treatment map, I can see which case hasn't followed it, which is this one. I can see the citation in context, and I can see the context in which that case chose not to follow mine. So in this case, it didn't really support the submission anyway. So I can investigate all of those flags when it comes to research using the edge tools. The AI tool just gets me there faster.
Can you do like the I've talked about CoCounsel specifically, not in the context of Westlaw, and we were talking about being able to do searches where you talk in sort of slightly more vague terms, about I'm trying to think of the example, but how they're feeling, or perhaps slightly more subjective things. Is there a case where they were feeling, I don't know, angry? I'm not using a very good example, but can you ask those subjective questions of the case, or perhaps sort of find some of the things that might be harder to find through more traditional methods?
It certainly does assist in pinpointing things because it can do more of a, I don't want to say fuzzy logic because that's not quite right, but it can pick up those inferences, because with a normal search, with a Boolean search or a terms and connectors search, those terms have to exist for the document to be retrieved. And that's certainly not the case with the AI. It can be a lot more flexible with how it interprets the search that it runs in the content.
Yeah, that would be really interesting, wouldn't it? Because that's not really been possible to analyze before from using those Boolean terms. That would be really interesting to see what comes back from that. So sorry if you was there more demo?
I mean, I could keep going at this all day, but I think you've got the idea.
Well, no. I mean, I find it fascinating. Tell me about because we're going to run out of time. But I know that obviously one of the things we haven't talked about, which is always comes up on people's lists of importance, is security and data privacy. So can you talk me through that in terms of, if I'm a firm looking at this, how I'd be assured that that you can sort of answer all the questions that they have.
Andrew, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we access the language models via non-retention APIs, and what that basically means is that Thomson Reuters prohibits any third-party vendors and suppliers of large language models from retaining any of our data and any of our customer data, or using it for the purpose of training their language models. And it sits within, so we're very specific, we're very strict, that is absolutely non-negotiable. They are prohibited from retaining or using any of our data or customer data. And it sits within the wider information security framework that Thomson Reuters has in place, and the policies and the safeguards and the constant assessments, adherence to ISO and NIST standards. So it's something we take exceptionally seriously, because we know our customers take it exceptionally seriously. So it's a very high priority for us to give our customers the reassurance that we are looking after their data and protecting their privacy. So
does that mean it sits within your firewall, or what does that mean in terms of the wider sort of,
some of it does, some of it, particularly the parts of the RAG process, are proprietary to Thomson Reuters. It's at the very end of the process that we then send the data that has been retrieved by the RAG process to the large language models, and we do that via this non-retention API, and we encrypt it both in transit and at rest, so when the data is going and when it arrives at the language model, and as soon as it's been used and a response has been returned, all of that data is deleted.
Okay, thank you. I think that we unfortunately are pretty much at time, but that's been, I really appreciate, do you know what, and I think that people listening will also agree with this. I really appreciate you being candid about the use cases and what it's capable of at the moment. I do think that it's not helpful in some of the conversations I have with vendors where we kind of try to gloss over these things. I think it's really important that we have these frank, really, I think for the end user, they're faced with a lot of decisions right now and a lot of potentially things that they've been put under pressure to buy. And so I do think that these kind of candid conversations are super helpful. So I'm really grateful to you for making the time to have that conversation with me. So Andrew and Jessica, thank you very much. And that's all we've got time for.
Thank you.
Thank you.